All right, let's jump right into this explainer and trace an absolutely incredible geopolitical domino effect. We're looking at a sequence of events that is currently threatening the political survival of one of the world's most resilient leaders, Benjamin Netanyahu. We are going to explore how a single, dramatic international incident is crashing headfirst into deep domestic fractures, creating what is essentially a perfect storm. Our inciting incident for all of this is a stark one. According to reporting by Axios, this blunt question, "What the fuck are you doing?" was thrown down during an explosive Monday evening phone call from US President Donald Trump to the Israeli Prime Minister. And this call reportedly forced a sudden, total military stand down in Israel. Just as they were gearing up to escalate their military operations, this incredibly direct intervention from the United States literally stopped them dead in their tracks. Section 1. The dramatic reversal. To figure out why this high-stakes call actually happened, we need to rewind and trace the rapid chain reaction of events that started just hours prior. On Monday morning, Netanyahu's government announced they had ordered the Israeli military to strike targets in the Lebanese capital of Beirut. Now, doing this immediately strained a very fragile April ceasefire brokered by the US. And the ripple effect was instantaneous. Iranian negotiators signaled that this was a totally unacceptable violation of that ceasefire, and they immediately threatened to just walk away from their ongoing negotiations with the United States. Section 2. Iran's global choke points. But you see, Iran didn't just threaten to ditch the diplomatic table. They leveraged something much, much bigger. The sheer scale of the stakes here is massive. Iranian state media claim they could tighten control over the Strait of Hormuz, and if necessary, even block the Bab al-Mandab. For some context, this is a truly vital global trade choke point between Yemen and the Horn of Africa. It has become an incredibly important alternative export route for Arab oil producers. So the big takeaway here, Iran was essentially threatening to severely disrupt global oil markets. That's a move that would send instant shockwaves through the global economy and, directly hit everyday gas prices. Well, this massive economic threat apparently spooked President Trump. It led directly to that evening phone call we mentioned at the start, and subsequently a post on Truth Social. Trump publicly declared the attacks were off, stating that Israel and Hezbollah would not attack each other, and added just minutes later that talks with Iran were continuing at a rapid pace. The US essentially reached over and pulled the emergency brake on Israel's military operation. Now, to be completely impartial here, we have to note the conflicting reports on how this phone call actually went down. While Axios claims Trump was furious and calling Netanyahu crazy, well-connected Israeli journalists, like Anit Sigal, insist the tone was professional, if a bit tense. But honestly, regardless of the volume of the call, the outcome was exactly the same: a highly public and undeniably embarrassing retreat for the Israeli prime minister. Section 3, Backlash from all sides. And this brilliantly illustrates how external geopolitical pressure creates absolute internal chaos. Consider this staggering backlash from rivals and coalition allies alike. Naftali Bennett, the right-wing former prime minister, outright accused Netanyahu of losing control over Israeli sovereignty. Yair Lapid, the leader of the opposition, said Israel is turning into a protectorate state. Gadi Eisenkot from the centrist Yashar party called the U.S. demand humiliating. And perhaps most dangerously for Netanyahu's immediate grip on power, his own far-right national security minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir, publicly urged him to just tell President Trump no. The prime minister was being violently criticized from every possible angle for yielding sovereignty. Section 4. A crumbling domestic coalition. Let's move to the next crucial point and see how this intense geopolitical pressure crashes into a domestic coalition that has already functionally fallen apart. To understand the extreme fragility of Netanyahu's government right now, we just need to trace the timeline. The underlying fracture here is the ultra-Orthodox military conscription exemption. Netanyahu completely relies on two ultra-Orthodox parties for his parliamentary majority. Now, this exemption has been in place since 1948, but because the ultra-Orthodox population has ballooned over the years, the demands on the military have grown intensely controversial. It all came to a head in mid-2024 when the Supreme Court ruled the status quo was illegal, which culminated just last month in the ultra-Orthodox parties actually turning on him and voting to dissolve the Knesset early. Netanyahu desperately attempted to navigate this mess. His government proposed a bill that nominally introduced conscription, but it contained so many caveats and opt-outs that roughly 90% of ultra-Orthodox individuals would have been able to get out of service if they wanted to. As you can probably imagine, this attempt at a giant loophole went down terribly with the general public, who are bearing the brunt of the military burden.
He temporarily shelved it when the conflict escalated, but make no mistake, that unresolved anger is still boiling right under the surface.
Section 5. The end of Mr. Security. So all of these dominoes lead us to the ultimate question. Will these compounded crises permanently dismantle Benjamin Netanyahu's core, self-cultivated political identity? For decades, his enduring electoral appeal has been his image as Israel's Mr. Security, the unique guarantor of safety who could coax the U.S. into action whenever needed. But when we contrast his past successes against today's reality, well, that pitch starts to crack. A year or so ago, following events like the 12-day war in June 2025, his strategy looked convincing, right? Hamas was degraded, Hezbollah's leadership was decapitated. But contrast that with the present reality. Hamas actually remains in control of Gaza, Hezbollah is proving to be a highly capable adversary, and crucially, the U.S. is actively imposing deals that strictly restrict Israel's strategic goals. Which leaves us with this final provocative thought to ponder. Throughout his entire career, Benjamin Netanyahu has perpetuated an increasingly expansive understanding of what Israeli security requires. But as he finds himself completely boxed in by U.S. demands, Iranian threats, and domestic mutiny, he seems unable to fulfill those very security promises. So has the great survivor of Israeli politics finally engineered a security trap from which he simply cannot escape? It's a question that is absolutely going to define the geopolitical landscape of the Middle East in the coming months.